All right, a small crowd. The privileged few is how I
Move
would
up,
put
come
it.
on now, everybody come to the front.
Yeah. So thanks for joining this session. My name is Venky Yerrapotu. I run the global services and support organizations at MetricStream. This case study is all about how can we accomplish even more working together. And with me, I have two panelists from Fannie Mae. I'll quickly introduce them. We have Sridevi. She's a technical director in ECIO division of Fannie Mae. She and her team provide end-to-end technology support to various corporate applications within the finance, HR, and enterprise risk areas. Prior to Fannie, Sridevi was worked as a management consultant at PwC and Deloitte. Thanks, Sridevi, for joining.
Sure.
And to my left, I have Lisa Barrett. She is a member of the Fannie Mae Technology Organization, responsible for managing all aspects of the company risk and audit portfolio. Her responsibilities include development, project deliveries, production, system stability, and strategic technology planning. She spent the last 3 years implementing MetricStream solutions within a large cross-organizational, cross-functional team as both a IT SME and a GRC expert. So thanks, Lisa.
My pleasure, thank you.
So we're gonna keep this conversation very organic. We don't have any PowerPoints. As my CEO told me recently, PowerPoint stands for no power, no point. So we will keep the conversation going. So feel free to ask questions after, after every response we get from the panelists. So what we really want to achieve in the next 30-40 minutes that we have is to kind of give you all a perspective on how co-development models work, right? What are the value drivers? What does it take to set up a model, a co-development model? How are the responsibilities shared between vendor and the client? What are the technology investments and personal investments clients need to think about? And there is another important point from Fannie Mae case study perspective is to how do you use agile methodology to do implementations. And Lisa will also explain how do you use agile methodology in a fixed price. So that should be interesting.
That's after the meeting.
And I will, this is one case study. We're going to talk very specific to Fannie Mae, but I will, towards the end, I will also cover other scenarios where co-development actually works, right? So with that, I will start with my first question. Maybe, before we get into the co-development, and this is for Sridevi and Lisa, can you kind of explain the Fannie Mae solution footprint? What was the GRC journey like? Sure. And what are you planning next?
Yeah, I've been here pretty much all day, and I think our story is no different from any of the stories I've heard today, right? Pre-GRC, every single business unit in the company, they had their own risk taxonomy. They had their own approaches to measure and assess risks and issues. They also had their own way of describing the effectiveness of internal controls, right? And I think with the GRC program, which is about 2.5 years old now in Fannie Mae, what we've been able to achieve so far is a lot of progress in terms of how we have standardized our approaches to measure and manage and report on risk controls and issues. Right? And for us, the technology implementation to enable all of this change, in addition to bringing a lot of tools that we've had, and all these business units that I'm talking about not only had their different processes and languages, they also had their different sets of tools, all the way from SharePoint to actually COTS applications that these business units were using. So for us, the technology implementation of MetricStream was able to bring all of those tools together onto a consolidated platform. For us, that was a game changer, no doubt about it. And where we are heading now is, today we've implemented about 6 modules in production. We started off with case, PDMS, we went with issue management, enterprise-wide. I think we have about 2,000 users just using issue. Then audit, compliance. We are just about to put in our 7th module, which is the loss events module. And we have, at the moment, we have consciously paused. For the last month or so, we've consciously paused to look at M7, right? I think our user base was very excited when they saw M7 and they wanted to take advantage of the user improvements. But then also we noticed that M7 comes with very simplified architecture. And we want to take advantage of those, right? So we have decided to pause on implementing additional modules and upgrade to M7, right? And then reinitiate putting in the other new modules. So yeah, so far it's been a very eventful journey.
Right.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And Lisa, you
Lisa,
want
The
to
only
you
thing I
wanna
would
add
add to that is
something?
we've done it in a couple of years. We have we've got 6 in production. We've got 3 more apps waiting in the wings for M7, which we're going to implement on M7, within the next year. So it's been a really fast-paced, fast-moving project, and we've had a lot of great success thus
Right.
far.
And I also just wanted to add, right, one of the other things that we have done is this was not a technology implementation for us, right? This was a process overhaul and everything had to start from scratch in terms of, again, talking about standardizing. I think we have PwC as our implementation partner, and then MetricStream team, a team from Venky's organization helping us with the effort, and we've been able to rationalize the number of processes, the controls we have in the company. So for us, this is more of a continuous improvement journey right now. So that's where we are.
Right, thank you. And again, congratulations. 6 modules in 1.5, 2 years is not a small task, and I'm glad that you're standing tall and talking about it. Absolutely. So now jumping into the case study with respect to code development. What were the value drivers for Fannie Mae to choose this path?
Sure. So, when we started the program, it started off with a hybrid theme. We had the MetricStream team folks on site. We had our implementation partner team on site. And then, of course, we also had the Fannie Mae technology team, but we only had a handful of Fannie Mae technology folks. We didn't have a large base at the time. And the MetricStream team was fully owned all of the development tasks. And the Fannie Mae technology team, the 2 members that were embedded part of that team, were more to provide subject matter expertise around those legacy platforms to help with the integrations, conversions, so more of your typical SME type roles. But over the last couple of years, what we have done is, we've been able to hire really strong software engineers with Java and JavaScript background. We've been able to put them through MetricStream training, right? And because we work in an agile environment, in an open space environment, everybody sits together, and these new engineers that we have been able to bring in and who got trained on MetricStream, we paired them up with the MetricStream developers, and they've been able to do one-on-one coaching, right? And because we have a single backlog, and everything goes through that one single pipeline. We've been also, these new engineers have been able to pick up smaller stories at first. And Lisa developed a very, very comprehensive ramp-up schedule on how these developers can get started on taking more of the technology tasks. So I'll let Lisa explain a little bit about that process.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sridevi. Thank you.
Yeah. So Lisa, maybe a continuation of the question, right? Just from what got Fannie Mae? Is it normal for Fannie Mae to do all implementations in a co-development model? Is this GRC implementation unique?
So this was a bit of a learning experience for us. Let me just tell everybody that right up front. Our business partners were really excited about bringing MetricStream in the house. We have enterprise IT initiatives. One of them is move to the cloud.
Right.
Everybody's telling us to move to the cloud. So we purchased cloud, premium cloud MetricStream offering. That came with a UAT, that came with a production and a contingency environment. We didn't have a dev environment. So we thought, well, let's be smart and purchase one in cloud so we can do development work. And we did that. And then once we had all of this done and we brought the team on board, we brought MetricStream on site. We brought a really talented business analyst on site. We brought 3 developers on site. We made them take the Agile trainings, as Sridevi said. They had to go through all of our rigor around Agile. Fannie Mae is very passionate about Agile, extremely passionate about Agile and the benefits of Agile. But suddenly we realized, one, the development's going on behind the cloud, in the firewall at MetricStream. So for us, that was like a huge challenge. How are we gonna stop this? How are we going to implement our service delivery strategy? Our service delivery strategy is to, when this SI ends, to maintain and enhance the product in-house. That was one of our #1 goals when we signed up with, for this project. And that's typically what we do with the portfolios. It's cost effective and beneficial to obviously have your own in-house staff doing the work. So we had some barriers. We had to get out of the firewall. We had to break down the MetricStream firewall. We found out, as Sridevi said, we didn't have the right resourcing. The portfolio is full of COTS products. We didn't have, as she said, the correct skill sets. That was a challenge for us. And we had no code management. I mean, we didn't even, it's our code, we think it's our code, but we had no access to it. We had no way of checking it in, or keeping the versioning, or using any of our own tools. So these were all the challenges that we had in November of 2016 that we started to try to break down. And so we've been working, this has been a journey, as Sridevi said. We've been working through that over the past year and a quarter. And we've broken down the access and connectivity barrier. That was our #1 priority. We got to get access. We got to get out of the firewall. And so we did that, but it took a very long time. I can expound on that a little bit more now if you like.
Please.
Okay. So we went to our architects, because we can't do anything without networking, access management, info security. Architects are all having a say. We went in front of all of our groups and we discussed this and we said, all right, well, let's just VPN in. No. You can't transfer files. We can't control file content. They could be extracting all kinds of things in the Fannie Mae environment. That's not happening. So then we talked about a proxy with SSH. What we found out is we couldn't do that for the very same reason. So eventually our networking team came up with RDP, which is a direct connection from Fannie Mae to MetricStream. Essentially the RDP connection, and I don't know, Sridevi, if you want to talk more about that. Or do you want me to continue?
No, continue, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a direct connection. Essentially, we've got the Fannie Mae laptop or the Fannie Mae developer. We've got the Fannie Mae firewall, and we've got the internet, and then we've got the MetricStream firewall, and then we've got MetricStream. So essentially, what we did is MetricStream was good enough to set up an RDP server for us. Once they set that up, Fannie Mae gave them a whitelisted an IP to whitelist. They whitelisted that for us, and then we were able to put that IP through our firewall onto the internet, through the firewall over to MetricStream. And once we get into that jump server, we can then go out to cloud, to the database and the app server. So it's working for us beautifully at this point in time. And that was a huge barrier for us to break down.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions, comments from the audience? Yep, please.
I'll just shout it out.
So, you started doing the code development on M6.
We did.
That's correct, yeah.
6X.
That's correct.
And for M6, you said it wasn't on the cloud-based environment. So basically, you had to have a VPN in their environment. So they set up a separate environment.
Yeah, we couldn't VPN in. We weren't allowed to. We set up an RDP. It's Remote Desktop Protocol. Yeah, a server, and it's just they call it direct connection. It's a direct connection from Fannie Mae to MetricStream going through 2 firewalls with the internet in the middle. Yep, and that was designed by our networking team, and our InfoSec allowed us to use it.
Yeah, and if you're familiar with AWS, AWS offers something called a direct connect, right? It's very similar to that. We call it, MetricStream calls it direct access, right? So once you have that, both the networks open to talking to each other, then you set up this RDP protocol. It comes with a small cost, which we totally believed it was worth it, right? And that allowed our developers to start accessing the application that was on MetricStream side of the aisle.
So was it the same code base that you both accessed, or you create another?
No, it's the same code base. In fact, we have access to SVN, MetricStream's SVN. So we have about 3 Fannie Mae developers and 4 MetricStream developers that are all currently on site at Fannie Mae, developing the code as part of our sprint schedule. And all these 7 developers, as the user stories get prioritized, they check in and check out of this code repository. So it's very transparent in the sense how it almost feels like they're part. It's just part of one organization doing the code, doing the development.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It didn't start out that way. I'll just jump back there because we had, if we think about our environment list, we had, like I said, we had premium cloud, we have UAT, prod, contingency, and then we thought we were being smart and we bought a dev in the cloud. But what we found out is behind the firewall was a dev and a QA environment that MetricStream was doing the work on. That's gone. The dev is gone in M6. Everybody's doing the work on the cloud together, one environment, one team, as Sridevi said. We still have a non-shared QA. So we had to break that up, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about that next.
Yep.
One of the things we had to do with the QA is MetricStream does their own QA. They have a resource for that, and the Fannie Mae team unit tests in dev the work that they do. And that's part of our mentoring and our intention to bring this skill set up for the development team.
Yeah. So MetricStream in-house uses SVN to manage our code, both in R&D as well as in services to manage the configurations, extensions that we do. So we did set up an SVN server. It's a very low cost, server on the dev machine, and that's where all the developers do their check-ins and do the code management. Yeah. That kind of brings dovetails into the next question. One of the things that everyone asks when there is code development, where is the accountability, right? Who owns what, who is responsible, right? Is MetricStream, washing its hands off on quality. So that will kind of explain, how we have our servers set up. Maybe Lisa, you can chime in. How is the responsibility matrix? How does the responsibility matrix work on this implementation?
Maybe, I can start it off.
She wants that one.
No, I can certainly start it off, right? I think the accountability, no question, starts and ends with Fannie Mae, right? At the end of the day, if something does go wrong with the platform, I get called onto the red carpet, right? So it's definitely, the accountability is definitely with Fannie Mae. But of course, we recognize that MetricStream, being an equal partner, right, they are responsible for the task. We have a very, very talented program team. Our product owner is sitting at the very back. She makes sure that, we are all saying, we are all marching towards the same path, and we have a dedicated Scrum Master who is sitting right here too. So I think we have this talented pool of folks who are helping us stay on schedule, and they help us being accountable, right? But when it comes to the task execution, again, because we are operating as a single team, every member of the team exactly knows what they're responsible for, right? Because we have these daily stand-up calls, and they're supposed to talk about blockers, and if there is issues that come up, we come together as a team to figure it out. And we follow very standard agile Scrum methodology. There is nothing magical about it, right? And so far it's been working great.
And then we just to add to that, we do have some rules around that. Like Sridevi said early on in this presentation is, we start any new developer off with, and first of all, we want a mix of skills. We know we need highly technical folks, but they need different development skills. There's a lot of PL/SQL. There's a lot of JavaScript. We're finding that having a mix, among the developers is a good way to go, expert in this, expert in that. But one of the things we require when we bring them on is that they go through all of our trainings. There is a developer training offered by MetricStream. It's a 5-day training. They have to take that. We have recordings of the training. They have to go through that. They're responsible for going through all of the technical documentation on their own and learning about the workflows and how things work in MetricStream. That is a prerequisite before we even give them a user story and put them into a sprint to start working. We've been very fortunate in the developers we have that they've come up to speed quite quickly. But we had a sprint mentoring process, as Sridevi was saying. For a sprint, you are partnered with somebody from MetricStream. Those partnerships are very tight. They meet daily. They talk about the stories that are assigned, how the stories are executed, how they're unit tested, all of that. One of the other things that we're doing is the velocity. So right now, even though it's one team, we have a sprint velocity, and that velocity is set, for the Fannie Mae team, we have targets, and for the MetricStream team, we have targets, and together that makes up one full velocity that we manage. The only other thing I would add to this, and this is something we haven't touched on yet, is the code. Who owns the code, right? Fannie Mae, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of our challenges. We don't really have access to it, right? There is continuous integration. There is continuous deployment. It's not automated on the MetricStream side. Fannie Mae would like to see that change in the future. That's one of our barriers that we're trying to break down. So we'll be working on that over the next year to see if we can't automate some of that process. Right now, because we do have concerns about not having the code in our suite on our side, we do duplicate work currently. Every time we have a release, we bring the code in-house, and using our tools, we're versioning it. So that's got to change. That is our last barrier, and that's what we're hoping that we can change within the next year.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, there are 2 questions here.
So I'm curious. 2 questions.
Okay.
How was the morale from the existing developers when you migrated from waterfall to Scrum? Assuming you were on waterfall.
Yeah, and so for us that was not a big issue because we had a very, very small team. So it was just Lisa and maybe one other developer, right? But what was also happening in the company was the company as a whole was also moving towards agile. So there was this huge transformation that was just going through the company. So for us, it was very natural to just move, as we are starting this 3-year strategic program. It was very important for our leadership and also I think for the team itself to start working towards this new target that the company has set up. So for us, I think that probably was not as big of an issue.
And we made it fun, right? We had a ton of trainings. There were all kinds of trainings around the company. Everybody went to those. There was a lot of team building, a lot of collaboration. And I think people just love Agile because it's people-centric. right? And the big benefit is it's iterative, right, and incremental. So we're putting small pieces of code in, we're reducing risks, we can troubleshoot that easily, and we have a cadence where we're releasing every month. So it's been a really big benefit, and I think it's a win-win for us.
Absolutely.
So that leads to the next question, which I don't know if you guys have to do with that, but operational issues, how do you add that back into the Scrum?
You mean production incidents?
Yeah,
I'll let you wanna go first.
yeah. No, I think that certainly, we struggled with that a little bit early on in terms of, here we have a Scrum team that's, going 150 miles an hour on implementing new modules, new functionality. But then for the modules that have been in production, of course, there are always going to be these tweaks that are coming up, right? So originally what we have done is, we were taking that work through an additional developer that was not part of the core Scrum team, right? But then we quickly realized that was not optimal because, the code, this developer who's doing it on the side, the Scrum team was not fully aware of everything that's going on. Right, so we partnered with our product owner and came up with this strategy of having a single backlog, right? And Nita, who's our Scrum Master, helped to put that in. She made it more formalized. So right now everything goes through a single backlog, right? And the product owner works with the stakeholders within each of our communities. And then she has the final right to say which user story goes into a sprint.
And just to add to that, we have a production engineering team
Yeah.
and a production support team. And they are the first level, right? So we have a problem, it's gotten to that level where we're trying to look at code, we're looking at data in the back end, trying to figure out what's going on. If it's a data issue and it's something that is specific to production, a stock workflow, for example, we do have a lot of those, things like that. Those are done in a data mod, a DCU or a DB mod or whatever you might want to call it when you modify data in the
data
back end.
correction
Yeah,
unit,
data correction, that's done by the production team. If it's a code change, it's going to go back to dev, as Sridevi said, back to the Scrum room and get into the cycle, and then the product owner is going to prioritize that based on everything that's sitting in the backlog. And that's a tough job because we have 6 apps in production.
How long are your sprints?
2-week cycles.
Right. There was another question. Yeah, please.
So, you mentioned everything is one batch, right? So, when you initially started the code development model, did you start off with like the low-hanging fruits, like production issues, label changes, all those?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, what we actually, when we first started the code development, Fannie Mae team was more focused on integrations and conversions, right? Because we felt that does not impact with this, the core development that was being done by the Scrum team. So it was more of these ad hoc work that actually complements to the Scrum, whatever the Scrum team was working on. So we started off with those, right? But then as the team started, as the Fannie Mae development team started to get mature and more comfortable, then we started them to take up user stories within each sprint.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Every user story gets tagged with certain points. So of course, when they started, they would pick up like a 2-pointer or a 3-pointer, and then now eventually they've gone up to like 8, 10 points also. But we did start them off very slow.
Yeah. And there was a partnership there. So we had one experienced MetricStream person with the new person.
Yeah.
Explaining the story, how they're thinking through the pseudocode of the story, how they're going to implement that, how they're going to unit test it, all of that. Yeah.
The second question was, you said something where you mirror from their code into your.
We do.
What is that for? I didn't understand. I thought you
So when the packages are created for production deployment, we take those packages and we send them to Fannie Mae, and Fannie Mae checks them into their own repository using their own tools.
Right.
And we want to get rid of that, obviously, and that's going to be a matter of breaking down that last barrier, that continuous integration,
Right.
continuous deployment.
Right. I think we are just waiting for, we want to work with MetricStream to figure out how we can get access to their CI/CD tool, the Jenkins, right? And once we get there, and if we are able to promote the code from one instance to the other, then we don't have to bring it back to
right.
Fannie Mae,
That's right.
right? Because
Short
we do
term.
have Fannie Mae owned instances within MetricStream, and as long as we have access to those CI/CD tools, I think we wouldn't have to bring it back.
That's right. It's a short term. It's a short-term solution.
Yeah, it's right.
Because
It's just a
weren't
code
comfortable.
repository.
Yeah. We weren't comfortable with the fact that we couldn't see the code, own the code, know about the versioning of the code.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit controlling, I know. Sure.
So how does, sorry, was there another question? No. How does the quality assurance process work? And is there anything, with this code getting duplicated, does it have anything to do with the way the QA process is set up right now?
We have no issue with that in terms of bringing the code in-house.
Okay.
But I think with the QA process currently, I don't know, Sridevi, do you want to jump in
Yeah,
first?
yeah.
Okay.
So with the QA process, what we have done is, we made sure. So when we talk about code duplication, the code doesn't come back to Fannie Mae until it's fully promoted to MetricStream's production, right? The code that is sitting on the Fannie Mae side is just sitting there for the sake of, completeness or whatever, right? But so for us, the code duplication is not, obviously we don't want to do that, but that doesn't impact the quality assurance at all.
Okay.
So what we have done is, as part of the core team, we have an automated tester and a functional tester that vet through the everything, and then we also have the program team who's looking at stuff, and then finally you also have the end user, the user acceptance that's being done. So we typically have like 3 rounds of testing, but even before it goes into the QA world, the developers are testing each other's code. Right, and for us, this was one way to get people acquainted with what other person was doing, even though they were sitting in an open space, and we are using agile Scrum methodology. I think I came up through developer ranks, right, and the only way for somebody like me to get comfortable with other people's code is for me to review it. So that's what we have done, right? So as part of our SDLC methodology at Fannie Mae, we have to do formal code reviews, and then we have to do our developer testing, which we call unit testing, right? And so that unit testing, we do make sure developers test each other's code, and then it gets promoted, of course, into QA, which goes through additional testing by the QA resources from MetricStream. Then our functional testers come in from Fannie Mae, and then the program team testers, and then the end user community.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add to that is we don't, the QA environment is not shared. So the MetricStream team does their QA in the environment. The Fannie Mae team today, this is the M6 world. An M7 vision is different, and we have a shared QA. So everybody's going to be doing testing in the same QA. And we've just set that up recently. But currently in M6, we do have the Fannie Mae team doing their unit test in dev. And as Sridevi said, the team meets daily. They go through the stories together, discuss the testing and what they've done. They show each other the coding they've done, and then we answer questions. We have like a Q&A among ourselves just for knowledge transfer.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So, I would like to maybe, Fannie Mae definitely is one very interesting and very successful case study on how to set up code development. We also have done code development with a few other customers. And I just wanted to share some of the parameters that are in play, or that come into play, when we think about code development. And also the scenarios, not every implementation is set up for a code development, right? What are the scenarios, I would like you all to consider, when you think about code development. First of all, the parameters, right? Co-development for an on-premise implementation versus a cloud implementation, the parameters are different, right? Some of the things that we discussed, around the for the cloud, right? Around the firewall, how do we set up, and source code management, right? So there are variables that will come into play which are different when you're doing on-premise implementation, right? Fannie Mae is all on-site, right, or onshore, right? But there are models where we are going to have offshore. We're going to have co-development with not just the client, but the client's system integrator or a partner. So that's a model. Then there will be models, we've seen where it's actually a hybrid. We have some people on site, some people onshore, and some people offshore, and there are partners. So different combinations are possible, and you just have to think through, how the whole SDLC is going to work when you have so many different players, in the equation, right? Co-development, one of the things that you all have to think about is how do you support co-development, right? And this is something, I think Fannie Mae has actually a great structure. They have taken accountability for that. And, so they have, they go through the same product backlog to, service some of the support tickets. But on a long run, how do you sustain this? These are also, and especially, if the client has developed, let's say customizations, has done some customizations, who gets to support it? All this have to be thought through. There is always a solution, it's all, some might be contractual, some might be, just an agreement, a gentleman's agreement, but there are ways you can figure that out, right? And when do you need co-development, right? What are the ideal situations for this? So if your implementation is purely packaged, there are pretty much, just the standard integrations around single sign-on, but nothing too complex, right? You might not need co-development. This is going to be a very cookie-cutter kind of an implementation, right? If your implementation is going to involve enhancements, right, to the application, you are building some new workflows or you are adding new forms, that is definitely, co-development ready and ready for co-development, right? Wherever you have legacy data and that needs to be migrated, I definitely would recommend co-development. You know your data well and more than anyone else, and it always helps to partner with the customer's IT to actually bring in the data, whether it's data cleansing or data transformation. And that's, for me, is one of the key models, where scenarios where co-development will be very helpful, right? So any other questions from the panel? Anything else, Lisa, Sridevi, you want to add?
No, as I said, I think, some of the drivers you just talked about, I think, as I was listening to you, there are many check boxes that I can check for Fannie Mae. I think over the last year and a half that I have been part of this program, there are certainly a lot of lessons that we have learned that we would, will apply for our M7 upgrade process. And one of the big things was to just educate ourselves on the effort that goes around maintaining these configuration changes, right? Just because we have access to MetricStream development environment doesn't mean that we are going to change the app Fannie Mae way. That's not the intent.
Right.
And I think we have the support from our program team as well to not do that. So we are certainly we are certainly trying to stay out of the box as much as possible. We don't have any customizations, but we do have extensions, right? Something a little, I call extensions something between configurations and customizations. So we certainly have those. And I think the other big thing is just making sure that you have the right resources. I think we've been very fortunate to have a dedicated team that's been supporting us throughout the journey. So I think just finding the right talent is also key, especially when you have taken on the burden of co-developing a SaaS platform.
Yeah, yeah, please. Go ahead in the back.
On the extensions and line between customization
Yeah.
configuration. From a software ownership perspective, the development of software is being put in MetricStream's cloud. Does MetricStream have rights to that software, or how does that manage?
So we are using MetricStream's development tool set, right? But it's our data that's in their cloud, right? So and then some of the reports that we have developed or the forms we have developed that are very, very specific to Fannie Mae needs. So I would assume that those are Fannie Mae owned. Venky, you can correct us if I'm wrong.
And you can define extensions
The
as well.
IP for these extensions always resides with the client. The way we look at our SDLC is, you know, it's always through our IP ownership is with our products and whatever comes on the product roadmap. It is very much possible that Fannie could have built an extension, maybe it's already there in the roadmap down the lane, or we might, you know, put it as part of an MetricStream special interest group discussion and prioritize it if other customers are looking for it. But typically, the extensions done on that instance will be the client's
We own the
property.
code. Yeah.
Right.
So you expect your M7 upgrade to be much shorter because of less customizations in your current 6 apps that you have?
No, I think, see, I think we have more awareness of what it takes to go through an upgrade because this is our first upgrade since starting the GRC program. So I think if we ever have to go to M8, then I think it's going to be much, much easier. But, you know, as we are just embarking on this M7 journey, our product owner has been very consistent in her messaging as well as our executive sponsor as well about not making changes that are going to make our next set of upgrades expensive, right? So that's the message that we are taking to our end user community, and it's a consistent message that they get every single time we meet with them.
And just to add to that, you know, everything that we've done to these 6 apps is stored in a tool, in an agile tool. We use Jira currently, and we flagged every single user story based on what we did. So it could have been a configuration, it could have been what we call high configuration, that may be an extension, it could be a customization, we do have maybe 1 or 2 maybe. But anyway, every story has a flag, so we know if it's something that we can simply reapply when we upgrade, because we do have to reapply some of the changes. Some of them we have to review and reapply. There's other ones that we can just move the code. If we've created it, we can just take the code and move it into M7. And then there's a third category where we can just, what's the last one? Reapply extensions and
Lift and shift, right?
And lift and shift. But essentially, we know what those are because we've tracked it from day one. And that has been a huge benefit with the Agile tools.
All right. There are no other questions, then I will close this panel. Thank you, Sridevi, Lisa.
Of course.
Okay, thank you.
For sharing your experiences. So thanks, you all been a great audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.